These are not hats, they are not umbrellas, they are boats, coracles, a primitive form of boat found all over the world. The coracles are woven of reeds, and believe it or not, they're very practical.
Armand was very curious to see how they were propelled and steered. Well, the men use an ordinary paddle, but the steering is a mystery.
We wanted to organize a race, so we offered a reward, and soon the men were lined up ready for the starting signal.
I wanted pictures of the spectators, especially the children. This little boy had seen Armand using his binoculars. The little girls and boys were soon as much interested in watching me as in watching the race.
When the boats returned, I noticed that the stroke was particularly skillful. Could you paddle a coracle?
This is the winner.
Notice this one standing in his boat using a double slicing action, resisting spin by standing with his legs apart.
Here's a man maneuvering his coracle without any paddles at all. He is standing with one hand on the edge and bouncing his boat forward.
We propose another race without paddles, but apparently this has never been done before, to which we naturally reply, well, let's try it. Nobody can find an answer to that, so the men accept and start throwing their paddles down on the beach. But we noticed that some of them kept the paddle in the coracle, presumably as insurance.
The men jump in and start bouncing for dear life.
Our contestants are on their way back, approaching the finish of the race. One turns over. Our skilled one-handed performer's way ahead. He casually holds a paddle in his other hand.
Grinning all over his face, the winner reaches the shore.
One man has arrived with a coracle full of water. It's easy enough to tip it over, lift it in the air, and drop it again on the surface. Here's a latecomer who obviously gave up trying. He pulls his coracle out of the water and up the sandy beach. It gives us a chance to make a picture showing the close weave of the strips, which are the secret of the construction of these coracles. Amazingly light, yet durable and strong. We flew to Malaya. I don't know who in Malaya or in Thailand first thought of training monkeys to pick coconuts, but it was a terrific idea. Coconut trees are very tall, and the nuts on one tree don't all ripen at the same time, so it's a tremendous and dangerous labor to pick them by hand. Monkeys do the job far better.
The only monkeys we have ever seen trained for coconut picking were of a species called the pig-tailed rhesus. Their training is very much a family business and a skilled occupation, unknown outside of Thailand and Malaya.
The handlers direct their monkeys partly by calling instructions, but much more by pulling and jerking the rope with which each monkey is held in leash. The relationship between handler and monkey is very close. A monkey will obey only one master. The pig-tailed rhesus monkey is extremely ill-tempered, given to furious outbursts, and is very powerful. The owners of some of these monkeys have been savaged by their valuable pets. The relationship between master and monkey is not based on love, but more on mutual respect. The owner of the monkey treats him well because he is a big money earner, and the monkey has learned that the trainer, after all, will always have the final word in an argument.
Let's watch the monkeys at work. This is a young monkey, 2.5 years old, and he's only starting his training, and he's very excitable.
But now suddenly he gets stubborn. No, go on up. All he's being taught so far is to go up and come down on signal. This monkey is 4 years old, almost fully grown and pretty well trained, but he still needs experience. His judgment in selecting the ripest coconuts is not too sure yet, but he still gets a lot of instruction and advice from his owner. He gets to work, perhaps a little resentfully. The nut he is ordered to pick is jammed tightly between the others and almost impossible to move. The owner advises him from time to time and encourages him by little tugs on the rope.
That was a difficult nut, but this one is easier. I was afraid he might lose his balance, and this time he nearly did.
Watch him using his feet. A good trained pigtail rhesus is worth a fortune in local currency in Malaya or Thailand. A well-trained monkey can pick several hundred nuts in a day's work and do all the picking for an entire district. He can earn enough for his owner to support his family in comfort. You see that the monkey does not need to waste any time or energy coming down from one tree and up into another.
Apparently, this business increases by leaps and bounds.
A few hours of flying takes us back to Bangkok to see a performance of the most graceful dancers of the Far East, the classical dancers of Thailand.
The dancers were all girls, highly trained. They were beautiful and charming. Their costumes, made of the shimmering hand-woven silk fabric for which Thailand is famous, were, of course, the traditional costumes of the dancers of the royal court. Elegant, so perfectly cut and fitted that the girls were actually sewn into them.
The hands and fingers of the dancers have been trained since childhood to attitudes which seem almost impossible to us, and they play a great part in Thai dancing.
This perfection of movement is due to the Thailand government's regard for tradition and for their artistic heritage. These dancers are students of the National Academy of Fine Arts. Dances, musicians, and costumes are all generously subsidized by the state.
The instruments of the orchestra are fascinating. Xylophones with padded hammers dancing softly on the hardwood keys, drums of different sizes and shapes, gongs of silvery tone. These are wonderfully dignified instruments, built to high artistic standards, and here are expert musicians playing them. Traditional also in Thailand is the terrifying sport of sword fighting. Traditional, the ceremony which precedes each bout. Traditional, the music of flute, cymbals, and drums, played by a blind old man and 2 children. Sword fighting usually takes place in the courtyard of one of the temples.
The contestants, barefooted in red jackets, one with yellow sash, one with pink, kneel, bow, cross swords, invoke celestial protection, and perform prescribed gestures.
At last they approach one another. They have in each hand a long, heavy, murderous sword sharp as a razor. Make no mistake, the sport you're about to see is just about the most dangerous in the world. One slashes violently. The fight has begun.
We found this a terrifying spectacle. We have heard tales of many accidents and of terrible injuries.
Each contestant has lost one sword already. One of the fighters has lost both swords.
Be prepared for a surprise. In Thailand, the girls also take part in sword fighting. They too have their traditional ceremonial of prayers, and they have all the necessary courage. The girls fight with the same swords as the men, but each has only one sword, held with both hands.
One loses her sword, but almost instantly she succeeds in knocking the sword out of the other girl's hands. The time has come to return to the house of our friends and to pick up our little gibbon, Bamboo. He came running to Michaela.
We like coconut milk, and so apparently does Bamboo. But I didn't get much of a chance competing against him. This is interesting. It's the way gibbons always drink in the wilds, usually hanging from a branch over a pool or a river and dipping their knuckles in the water and licking them. It takes quite a while for a gibbon who has become a pet to learn to drink any other way. By the way, do you know that gibbons are very jealous? Watch.
We went to Singapore by plane. We had to be there on January 21st, the day of Thaipusam, one of the most dramatic of Hindu festivals. The little temple to which our guide took us was not at all imposing, and only a small crowd, mostly of Hindu women, was at the gate. But inside the courtyard of the temple, there were hundreds of people already watching the ceremonial. At once, one could feel a great current of excitement. We had our first view of the kavardis, the strange harness carried on the shoulders of the penitents who take part in the ceremony, and of the weird business, painful to see, of the needles and skewers driven through the cheeks and the tongue, the characteristic feature of a Thaipusam. As many as 200 pins, which I believe are made of bicycle spokes, may be embedded in a man's chest. Let me tell you at once that this is entirely voluntary on the part of these men, and there's a theory that they feel no pain, that they're in some sort of trance or hypnotic state. It is certainly true that no blood is seen to flow and no scars are left. Naturally, what interested us most were the kavardis, which the penitents carry on their shoulders in the procession. Nowadays, they are largely made of metal, put together with nuts and bolts. They're assembled on the spot just before the ceremony begins. The men who voluntarily submit to the carrying of the kavardis, to having their tongues and cheeks pierced with skewers, and their chests and backs with hundreds of needles and hooks, may be atoning for some shameful deed. They may also be carrying out a vow, a pledge entered into in the hope of saving the life of a wife, a mother, or some other person dear to them. They may have promised to take part in a Thaipusam every year of their life. Their pledge may even carry through 2 generations of their descendants.
It is not unusual for very young boys to take part in the Thaipusam, often as a result of a vow made by their father or even grandfather.
The hooks inserted in the skin of the back are used to pull heavy chariots in the procession. The hooks in the chest serve to hold small metal jugs containing curdled milk. Don't ask me what he was made to swallow. I couldn't find out. There was a whitish powder also, which was thrown on men who became hysterical, or was rubbed on their foreheads and seemed to calm them at once. But these things and the heavy fumes I could neither understand nor identify. All this was an astonishing sight. We couldn't get over the fact that no one seemed to pay the slightest attention to the milling crowd of sightseers, tourists, and photographers. They got in the way of the attendants and the chanting priests, and they showed little respect for proceedings, which obviously for the performers had deep religious significance. It was a striking example of the tolerance of the East. We are approaching the final stages of the ceremonies at this temple. Men carrying offerings, attendants, penitents carrying the heavy kavardis, relatives and friends shouting encouragement, reciting prayers, chanting incantations. Hundreds of spectators now leave the little temple where we have photographed them. They set out on the long, tedious, painful processional march of several miles to the Chaitya temple at Tank Road. To us, this slow march in utter exaltation and absorption, in the midst of the bustle of the city, clattering tramways and cars, seemed the most moving part of a most dramatic performance. The Thaipusam ceremonial is a tremendous act of faith. When we traveled in the Far East, we found ourselves using every possible means of transport, from the modern to the ancient. And the ancient can be very hard going at times. But not always. I want to show you Armand and Michaela Denis traveling in great comfort by boat.
We loved the Far East and the people we met. We'll tell you more of our adventures in a later program, and of the everyday life of the people. We travel through the klongs of Bangkok and photograph the people who live in what is almost a city of boats.
On our safari to Asia, we saw many strange sights. This, for example, which you can work out for yourselves. We saw tattooing, which originated in the Far East, and apparently it can be as painful as well as picturesque.
We filmed some wonderfully intelligent elephants. And in our programs, we shall tell you more about our pets.
Join us again on our next Safari to Asia.